All right, folks, we are live here on the Big Fight Weekend YouTube channel immediately after Jake Paul has won the main event over Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. Not unexpected. It was a decision. It was not a knockout. We are doing this live late night Eastern time, still prime time in the Pacific time zone. I'm here in the Honda Center. I'm merely TJ Rives on this Fight Freak Night recap. Hello to Big Dan Rafael, our insider. Full disclosure, again, the podcast audience is hearing us after the fact. We're doing it live, and I don't know how much longer before they tear the whole arena down, but we'll try to get some thoughts. Big Dan, not unexpected. Jake Paul wins. Sloppy fight, I thought, here at ringside. The arena in the Honda Center was electric for Chavez Jr., but not unexpectedly, again, I keep using those words, he didn't do a whole lot in this fight until the last couple of rounds.
You're being generous, TJ. He did absolutely nothing.
Yeah, he did nothing. He did nothing.
He's a fucking disgrace is what he is.
Yeah, Jake Paul gets the win. So give me a couple of more thoughts on what you saw, and I'll tell you a little more about being here, and then we're going to go over the rest of the undercard as well. Go ahead.
Well, I did think that Jake, he looked pretty good. I mean, we all have to remember he's still a novice, and I actually like the way that Chris Mannix positioned it when he was speaking on the broadcast, that even though Jake is now, 12-1, I guess, is his record, that he in reality now is like 3-1 because he's only had 4 fights against what you would say are quote unquote actual boxers. The 2 quick knockouts, Tommy Fury, and now Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. He was talking about the fairly unknown guys that he fought, Ryan Borland and Andre August before that. So and he made the point, and I agree with Chris 100%. If you pick your favorite fighter in the history of boxing and go look at who they fought in their first 4 fights, you will be surprised at the absolute direct that they fought. There's a few, the Lomachenkos of the world who turned pro against real guys, fought for world title, in the second and third fights, etc. But there's not a lot. So from that perspective, even an old shot, faded Chavez Jr., who hasn't been anything in literally 11 years or so, that was a good performance. He was, snappy with his jab. He landed way more punches. And Chavez looked like death warmed over for about 7+ rounds. Did absolutely nothing. I thought he would probably quit. To his credit, he didn't. He did come alive a little bit in the final 2 rounds to barely win those 2 rounds, and he loses 8 rounds to 2. As I made the comment earlier, the fact that one judge found a 3rd round to give to Chavez, I want to send that guy to therapy.
Well, I will say this: in the arena, he had the arena. Chavez, they were cheering for anything he would do. He just didn't do anything until the last couple of rounds. I will say this: I thought Jake Paul got tired late in the fight, first 10-round fight.
Second 10-round fight, TJ.
Or second 10. Well, did the other one go the full 10?
He went the 10-round distance against Nate Diaz.
Against Nate Diaz. But he looked tired, clearly in the 9th and the 10th round of this fight.
It's tiring when you keep hitting your opponent.
Yeah, but the other thing is, too, he's got a long way to go on putting punches together to fight legitimate, in their prime fighters. I know you're not saying that. Let's just see where it goes.
But that's the point, TJ. If you accept the notion that in reality he's like 4-1 or 3-1, I guess. What do you expect? He's not going to fight real guys. I mean, he may, if the money is big enough, that they come to him and say, "We'll give you a shot against Zurdo, or we'll fight you against, Anthony Joshua," who he was ridiculously calling out after the fight, or they make the cockamamie exhibition against Tank Davis. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a business. He's here to make as much money as he can if he can also win a world title or be involved in a fight against a legitimate champion. Of course. That's like a cherry on top.
And there's no disputing that he's done a masterful job of leveraging all of this to make a ton of money.
Yes, sir.
And fighting MMA guys, fighting Mike Tyson at 58 years old, fighting this tonight. The real question I have for you, we're going to talk about Zordo Ramirez in a moment. Is it realistic that Jake Paul is in a cruiserweight title fight, let's say within the next year? Do you believe, knowing what you know, that's realistic, that in another fight or 2, it could be a title fight?
The short answer is yes. And the little bit of longer answer, and the reason why, is because never forget this. The sanctioning bodies are business. Mm-hmm. Boxing is a business. Jake Paul generates massive amounts of money. He puts people in seats. He sells pay-per-view, and he gets attention. And everybody who has a chance to make $1 wants to be a part of that. I will be shocked beyond anything if when the next ratings come out from at least the WBA and the WBC, that Jake Paul is not inserted somewhere in the lower part of the cruiserweight rankings. That will make him eligible to fight for a title. They did this event with Golden Boy, who promotes, they obviously promote Zordo Ramirez. We'll see what happens. The titles are unified with Zurdo, has 2 of them. Maybe he'll be fighting Opatai in a 3-belt unification, but Badu Jack is there also. And any of those fighters, if they want to, who would be significant favorites against Jake Paul.
Right.
But they can make career money probably in fighting that fight. So, the combination of his economic muscle, the fact that he's going to get rated, the fact that the champions are looking to make the biggest money possible in the biggest events for what they'll perceive as an easy fight against him. And Jake's got nothing to lose, by the way. Let's say, for the sake of argument, he goes in the ring with the champion. He's going to make a piss load of money. And if he loses, he took a loss to Tommy Fury, didn't do anything negative about his career. He learned from it, I think. If he goes in there and he lost to a Zurdo Ramirez or a Jai Opataya, who cares? He'll give it a good. And if he wins, it's like one of the biggest sports stories of the century.
All right, so let's move on to Zordo Ramirez and the co-feature in Anaheim here. I say ringside. I mean, our buddy, your colleague Lance Pugmire reported this. He put on 20 pounds after the weigh-in. He came into the ring tonight at 220 pounds. He looked overweight. He looked slow. Yes, he won against Dorticos in the unified cruiserweight title fight, but my assessment was he was in slow motion a lot of the night. And, Jake Paul's licking his chops. He said in the ring, Jake Paul, after what I saw from Zordo Ramirez, give me Zordo Ramirez. What are your thoughts, Dan, real quick in the recap mode?
My thought is that Jake Paul is doing what a good promoter does. He's a hype man. At this moment, I don't care if Ramirez looked a little bit heavier and whatever. He still looked kind of light on his feet. He still threw a ton of punches. He still handily defeated Dorticos. I had it 116 to 111. The official judges were in that ballpark. I mean, it was pretty easy work for him. He stayed away from Dorticos' right hand. I would think he would kill Jake.
It was. Can I interject? I thought it was a fairly close fight where Dorticos had won some rounds through 8. Zurdo clearly won the last 4 or 5 rounds of the fight. Yes,
he dominated the second half of the fight. Yeah. I mean, Dorticos clearly was doing some work in the first few rounds. That's probably a combination of Zurdo has for his entire career basically been a slow starter. He's also seeing what he's got in front of him. Dorticos comes with the reputation of a big, tremendous right hand. So there's nothing wrong with taking a couple of rounds to ease into things. That's what a lot of guys do. In a 12-round fight, you can afford maybe to give away a round or 2 if you're that confident. And again, by the 4th round, 5th round, it was all Zurdo. I mean, Dorticos gave a good effort. I think we spoke about it in the preview that I thought it would be a competitive fight, which it was, but that Zurdo had a little bit better boxing ability, a little fresher, and that at the end of the day, he probably would win a decision. That's exactly what happened. Dorticos never landed, not a single time in the entire 12 rounds, the right hand. Landed a few, but nothing that was the clear type of devastating punch we've seen him before.
He's 39, Dorticos, we believe, the Cuban. He had fought 1 time in the last 3 years. He just didn't have a lot down the stretch of the fight. Is Zurdo and Opataya realistically next?
Yes.
I mean, Zurdo said in the ring, what a classic line, just a little while ago tonight. He said, hey, I don't have Opataya's phone number. Jai, give me a call. I don't have your number.
Well, supposedly, I mean, after Jai won his last fight down in Australia, he said he was going to go ringside for this fight. They didn't show him on the broadcast.
We didn't see him. We didn't see him.
They thought he was there. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. But listen, I've said this to you several times. Turki Al-Sheikh has stated on a number of occasions that that's a fight that interests him. It could easily be made to the end of the year. Golden Boy and the Opataya team were already discussing the fight, but everybody knew he was taking that fight at home. Zurdo, when he won the title in the unification against Billum Smith, part of the reason that could happen was because the winner, whoever it was, had already agreed they would fight the mandatory, which was Dorticos next. They gave him a step-aside fee. This was him keeping his promise and fighting the fight. So anybody saying that, like, there's somebody avoiding somebody, that's absolutely ridiculous. That fight, if it was going to happen, if it's going to happen, has always been presented as though it would be a 4th quarter of this year fight at the earliest. And I do think there's a very strong chance that could happen, unless Jake Paul came a call, and somehow they decided to make that kind of title fight where you couldn't resist the money or the opportunity. And he also was, they also have the relationship there because Turkey wants to fight that from a financial point of view. Even if Jake Paul did come a calling, if Turkey really wants to fight, he can afford to buy it for whatever price he wants.
Sure. All right, so we'll see what happens with that one. And again, I'm live here in the Honda Center on this Fight Freaks Unite recap. We're doing it live on YouTube, Saturday night, late night, podcast audience hearing it on its normal feed as it comes out. But we did it live on Saturday night after the Jake Paul pay-per-view. All right, the knockout of the night, my friend, is Floyd Schofield bombing Tevin Farmer. You and I did not see that coming. We both thought Farmer would win. Schofield hit him with a right hand in the first minute of the fight. And honest to God, Dan, when you watch the replay, Tevin Farmer's eyes are crossed and almost like slot machines on the canvas. And in the arena, the media, we're going, this is over. And sure enough, he wiped out Tevin Farmer, the veteran. Tevin Farmer, who stood in for 24 rounds with William Zepeda without getting hit like that or hurt like that. What do you make of Schofield and the win, and what does it do for him at 135? Go.
Well, it's huge for Schofield because he's taken so much grief over pulling out of the Shakur fight that was in February, and people saying he was faking his illness and he was scared to fight Shakur. He took an absolute beating on social media, and he admitted in his post-fight comments that he had seen some of those things that people were writing about him and saying it took a toll on him. He wanted to quit boxing. You know, he's a young kid. He's only 22 years old. That, you know, he took it to heart. And, you know, you got to grow thick skin in this business, whether you're in the ring or you're like, you know, a reporter on our side of the thing where you're going to take your arrows. But look, he was focused. Obviously, he was in great condition, and he went in there and he did the job. The first shot, the fight was basically over because even though Farmer, to his credit, he survived, you know, he was never going to be the same. It was just a matter of time. That last, when the ref jumped in and he had Farmer in the middle of the ring, he had landed a few shots, but the left hand that basically like just froze him in the middle of the ring, kind of bent over a little bit.
Yeah.
Like he looked like a statue, and like it's good the referee stopped it because one more shot and you might have been seriously hurt. But I'll say this also, and I'm not in any way detracting from Schofield because it was a legit big win. You know, and I know Farmer's now lost 4 in a row, but if you understand boxing, the 3 losses prior, the Raymond Morataya decision and the 2 very close fights against Zepeda, those are losses, yes, but they were, if you watch the fights, you know those were very, very close, could have gone either way type of fights with Zepeda. But the Zepeda fights were coming, you know, they happened, and this fight was pretty close to when that happened. So I think you'd not be, you can say Schofield looked awesome, which he did, but 2 things can be true at the same time. I believe, looking at what occurred, that those 24 rounds against Zepeda in a short period of time, plus throw in a tough fight against Morataya, that probably took a bit of a toll on a guy in his mid-30s.
Maybe, yeah.
No doubt about that.
But he got caught. He got caught, and Zepeda, again, is a very hard puncher, top fighter at lightweight. He couldn't catch Farmer like that. But, man, Schofield
But he just,
did
like,
it.
he got nailed. I mean, the hand speed from Schofield was impressive. And, you know, after the fight, when they asked, or they deferred to Oscar De La Hoya, who was Floyd Schofield's promoter, what do you want to do next? And he basically was like, look, we want the winner of Shakur against Zepeda. He was already scheduled to fight Shakur in February.
Right.
So the fight was made. Zepeda is the guy that has the 2 wins over Farmer closely. So that makes sense. So I feel like whoever is the winner of that fight,
sure,
there's no reason not to do the Schofield fight. I mean, I don't know if there's probably something that somebody might think is like a bigger deal, but that would be a fight that would attract a lot of attention, particularly if it was Shakur against Schofield because of everything that went on in February. So
agreed.
Schofield's in a wonderful position. That's a career-making win. This was the kind of fight where Golden Boy, I think, was sort of sick and tired of the antics of both Floyd and his father and was like, fuck it, let's put him in with a real guy and sink or swim. And he swam. And he won the race.
No doubt. He won big on Saturday night in Anaheim. Anything else from this card that you want to touch on? Dramatic knockout, obviously, in also one of the undercard fights.
Well, I'll tell you, I think there was
Julian Rodriguez and Avius Griffin dramatically ended after Griffin had knocked the welterweight Rodriguez down in the 8th round. Rodriguez survived, and then Rodriguez knocked Griffin out with 5 seconds left in the fight, Dan, earlier tonight. Dramatic ending.
That was also an upset because MVP had recently signed Griffin, who was coming with a lot of hype. He's part of that Terrence Crawford camp. He's trained by Brian McIntyre. And Julian Rodriguez, you know, for a number of years ago was a top-notch prospect. Only has the 1 loss, but he was with Top Rank, who were building him up for a while. He was really, his biggest problem was he was dealing with so many injuries. Now he seems like he's right, and he went in there and he did the job. It was a very close, competitive fight. It was actually a pretty good fight. And you mentioned about they exchanged the knockdowns.
Yes.
The knockout happened, and when you look at the scorecards at the end of the fight, he needed that knockout because otherwise he was looking at a draw on the fight card because two judges had the fight going into the last round, had it 85-85, and the other judge had him up 86-84. So even if he wins, he needed to do something to make sure that he won that fight. I mean, I guess if he just wins the round on a points, he would win a very close decision. But still,
but he didn't know that.
Right, that's my point.
He didn't know that. Yeah,
you don't leave it in the hands of the judges. So he knocked him out, almost knocked him out of the ring.
Yes,
and he scores a very dramatic win. And then that was a very nice knockout. And then the fight that came after that was also an impressive knockout from, I'm not going to call Griffin or Julian Rodriguez contenders yet, but the other guy, Raul Curiel, who was a 2016 Mexican Olympian, who got a little bit of a late start after the Olympics because he stayed amateur for a while. But he's looking good. He's in his first fight with trainer Robert Garcia. For whatever reason, he left Freddie Roach. I mean, he went from one great trainer to another, but certainly it looked like Garcia put a pep in his step. He's coming off the draw against Alexis Rocha. That was kind of a disappointment, but he looked really good in this fight. I mean, he wasn't fighting a top name. He was fighting just like a regular guy in Victor Rodriguez from Uruguay, but he put him out in a very ruthless kind of style. And he looked good.
Curiel made it 3 knockouts in a row until we got to the Zurdo co-feature there on the pay-per-view. So we at least had some excitement.
The bigger thing for Curiel was it was also a WBA eliminator, so it put him in a better position to potentially get some type of title shot. It won't be next. It didn't make him mandatory, but it puts him in a good spot.
All right, listen, they're trying to tear everything down around me. We got about 3 minutes left. Give me something on Deontay Wilder in the recap mode. Friday night in Wichita, got his knockout. What are your thoughts, and what is his future short term?
Well, I mean, he fought Tyrell Herndon. He got the knockout. It took him 7 rounds. I think some people were disappointed because Herndon had been knocked out in 2 rounds. 4 fights earlier by Richard Torres Jr., the prospect. And you figured Deontay Wilder, former heavyweight champion, one of the greatest punchers we've seen, would have maybe taken him out quicker. But I was glad that Deontay got the rounds. And if you're a fan of Deontay Wilder, and I wrote that I thought he looked pretty good, and I was harassed by people all day on social media. And my perspective is, here's a man coming off of a year layoff, coming off of a shoulder surgery, got absolutely drilled in his last fight, lost his previous fight, trying to gain some confidence, trying to get back in the groove. And he did what he should have done. He looked much, much better. I know it was a certain level of opponent, but he used his left hook, which has been a hidden weapon of his for years. He used his jab a lot, and it looked pretty sharp. He did mix in the right hands and land a few of them. He was a much more complete fighter. He didn't just stand there waiting to land a singular right hand. If you don't know what I mean, go watch the Luis Ortiz rematch or even the Joseph Parker fight if you don't want to, if you want to try to not to fall asleep again. So from that perspective, everything that he wanted to accomplish.
Fair to say you saw enough to say we should see some more, see if he's got anything left. You saw enough to say he can fight again, and let's see what's there.
I don't know if I go that far because if he retires, fine. But he's
okay.
At least if he's going to carry on, he showed that he's better than he was the last time out. But
the belief, though, is he's not retiring financially and otherwise. Right.
No,
so
get the fuck out of here. He's not retiring.
Yeah.
But so on Saturday morning, I spoke to Shelly Finkel, who was Deontay's career-long manager. He was actually, getting on the plane going to fly home, and we were discussing what the next move was. And he said, "Look, we have an offer from South Korea to fight a Korean opponent. If we find out that it's real and the money is really real, we're going to take that fight in the fall. We want a second fight, another tune-up type fight. We'll go there. We'll take care of that business, and then we'll look for a big fight. We want Joshua." If Joshua comes back in the fall off the elbow surgery and he fights whoever and Fury stays retired, let him do his, come back after the big knockout loss to Daniel Dubois. We'll take care of our guy in Korea. And then you tell us, first part of 2026 in the next fight, bring it on. We are ready for the biggest fight we can make. And obviously it would, it's way past its sell-by date, but there's a lot of people who would still like to see it. And, it makes no sense for them to pursue anything else. I saw people saying, well, Deontay should go fight Derek Chisora. He should fight, Fabio Wardley. What are you smoking? Get out of here.
On the intrigue. Okay.
Somebody said they should do that to try to build the Joshua fight. Build the Joshua fight. The fucking fight's been built for 7 years.
Agreed on that. Dan is surely in the middle of the night Eastern time. That's fine.
You got me all riled up. It's fucking 2 o'clock in the morning.
One more, and that is super middleweight contender Christian Mabilli, headlined Friday night in Quebec, and did score a knockout of Suleski, the veteran opponent. Your thoughts on how Mabilli looked? And he's obviously got to be in the conversation down the road at 168.
Oh, Mabilli is probably the legitimate number one contender in the division, regardless of the fact that he's now has won the vacant interim WBC belt. He's rated number one in the WBC. But, by all, if boxing was like, if they actually followed rules and did things the way you're supposed to, and not every single thing was only about the dollar, then Christian Mabilli should be the next challenger for Canelo Alvarez. But the sanctioning bodies are not going to mess around. And, a lot of people want to see the Crawford fight, so that's the way life goes. But he went in the ring in front of the Canadian crowd. He is that's like he's adopted Montreal as his home. This is the second fight in a row he's had in the Quebec City, the big arena, the Videotron Center. And he took apart Suleski. Now, remember, Suleski only been stopped one time. That was 2 fights ago. He got done in by a body shot from Diego Pacheco. And other than that, he'd been in with the ring with guys like Danny Jacobson, gone the distance with other good fighters, had gone the distance in a world championship fight at middleweight against Demetrius Andrade. Not a big puncher, but you get my point. He's shown durability. Had never been stopped until that fight. And Mabilli absolutely just annihilated him.
Yep.
I mean, just
big uppercut
right to him.
Big uppercut laid him out, right.
Massive right uppercut, and he was over and out. So it was quick, but it was explosive. I love Mabilli. To me, he's one of my favorite fighters to watch. He's explosive. He punches. He's not afraid to fight anybody. Just tell him who. Remember, he was ordered to fight Pacheco. Pacheco turned it down to go fight Trevor McCumbee in what is probably a much easier fight. Yeah. And so when that happened, Suleski was the next guy in the ratings.
Mabilli likely to fight at least once more before the conversation about a Canelo fight might or might not happen. At least once more, right? Who knows?
The Canelo fight at the moment is probably not even really realistic.
Now,
the one thing that is good is that Turki Al-Sheikh has mentioned his name, posted something about him. Yeah. There's a very good chance, based on what they were discussing on the broadcast on Friday night, that with that victory, there may be a spot for Mabilli to fight on the Canelo Crawford undercard, which, if that does happen, would help build up the prospect of him fighting the winner. And obviously, Canelo has 2 more fights in 2026, supposedly, with Turki under that contract. If it's Crawford and he elects to stay at super middleweight, that seems to be more like a lesser possibility. But again, Turki can make the fight happen if he wants it because he's got the money to spend on it. But the Mabilli camp and Mabilli himself, he's in the position. He doesn't need more tune-ups. He doesn't need any more contenders. Right. He's ready for a title fight, a real title fight, not an interim title fight.
All right, my friend, I know this is an abbreviated version of the recap podcast here. I've been live out in the Anaheim SoCal sun all weekend and here for the Jake Paul card, which overall I would give this thing like a 9 in terms of the knockouts earlier, the enthusiasm in the arena, the main event, kind of.
I can't give it a 9 because Chavez was a shitty opponent.
Okay, I got you, but we knew that going in. I'm just saying we got knockouts earlier in the card, and we had a Jake Paul main event. So there you go. Final thought from you.
I like the card. I mean, I thought the Zurdo fight was not great, but it was solid. I love the Curiel performance. Schofield was electrifying. Yep. Took care of Farmer. You don't need to have a 10-round brawl to make yourself, to have enjoyment watching an event, especially when it's that explosive and that dramatic. Even some of the preliminary fights were good that were before the main pay-per-view came on. Yeah, the return of Holly Holmes. She won her fight. I watched Joel Iriarte, an excellent Golden Boy welterweight prospect who got a tough test and came through nicely in his fight. There was a lot of stuff to watch. Even in the first fight of the night, got John Scrappy Ramirez gets a win, who stays in sort of title contention in the junior bantamweight division, even though he fought a little bit over the weight on the undercard. So there was a lot to look at besides just what the main card was. But again, if you're going to give it a 9, I think that's a little high because you still are basing a lot of whatever grade you might give an event based on the caliber of the main event.
But it's because
I thought Chavez was just straight trash.
I agree.
When the fight was made.
I would say overall, just because of the atmosphere, the whole thing in the building, it was a whole lot better than some of the other stuff we've seen.
Sure.
As of late. All right, listen, I've got to roll out of here before they take all of the table and the power away from being able to do the show.
I want to see them do that while we're talking.
Well, that was close. Did you see my hand a minute ago? It was close to happening live on the YouTube channel. Listen, way to hang in there with me. We'll be back on a normal timeline later this week in July. My friend, thank you. To the YouTube audience, thank you for watching. The podcast audience as well. Follow and subscribe on the podcast feed. Follow and subscribe and like us on YouTube if you like videos and coverage like this as we continue to share it out. For Dan Rafael, I'm merely TJ Rives. Jake Paul victorious tonight over Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. We've been doing it live. here from Anaheim for me. And Jake gets the win here. That's the biggest story out of this tonight in Anaheim. All right, with that, we're good on the Fight Freaks Unite recap show and podcast. Good night.